Well, it's a big day when I take the time to re-upload the intro. We have the correct intro. Welcome to the show, the Markcast live, if I get this right, from beautiful Arlington here at Choctaw Stadium. Andy Murray is joining me today. We're going to have a lot of other guests coming on. I told Mike Missile, this is a thrice and a lifetime moment here. We have the XFL Kickoff. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm great, Reed, and my gosh, we're finally here. We finally made it, man. It's here. I'm happy that you got down to Arlington. I'm afraid I was not able to join you in the South this time around, but either way, you're fighting a good fight as always. And this is it, man. We're finally here.
This is it. We're going to have lots of stuff. Schedule talk today. We've got lots of guests, lots of excitement. Jared checking in. Dorothy's going to be calling in later. Dorothy can't wait. We got Max here. Let's go. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. We have our beautiful suite here at it's the Texas Live here, Live by Lowe's, whatever, in Arlington, Texas. Andy, do you think I did okay with the background we got here today?
Considering the lighting, yeah, you did a fantastic job. You got the beautiful stadium right back there. I just kind of like the almost like pastel colors you got going on behind you is really good. I did see it was a lot nicer the day before though. It was like clear skies, and now today it's a little more cloud coverage. How's the weather looking down there?
It's beautiful. It's 47 degrees right now. Absolutely beautiful. Not a drop of precipitation. Yeah, we got 3 hours here to kick off. We're going to be taking you guys live here, 11 Central local time here to 1 o'clock. And then the XFL, they're going to be replaying that Player 54 on ABC. So we'll get you in here and we're going to get out because then I got to go put on my big boy clothes. And then I'm going to go. We're going to be at the stadium here, checking it out for everybody here. We have Max checking in. We finally made it. Broken fantasy drafts, you and I and all. Yeah, sounds like there was some fantasy issues last night. Jeff checking in. Game day. XFL Circle. What's going on, Mark? Looks really good in the background. Jared's happy. We're going to talk through all of the games today. Do you think that this is the most exciting game we have to kick off with the Vipers coming here to Arlington? It makes sense, right? Arlington would be in the kickoff. Do we like that as a matchup, Andy?
It is one of the most intriguing, I think, just based on the fact of who the coaching staffs are. You have two different dichotomies. You have the most established, in my opinion, the most established coaching staff in Bob Stoots and also Jonathan Hayes on the Arlington side. And then conversely, on the other side with Vegas, it's kind of like this new young hot product. You got Rod Woodson, his first ever head coaching job. Obviously, they were one of the last teams to kind of get themselves established in the league as far as their like venue and everything. So they're it's like them kind of coming onto the scene. Obviously, they're one of the new teams in the league. So I think it's a great matchup in just terms of intrigue and like the different stories between both of those teams. One that we have some history with and some we do not have any at all. So yeah, I think as far as an opening matchup, it's great. I do think that some of the other matchups, like for example, St. Louis and San Antonio, I really like, but we'll get into that more later.
Yeah, it's kind of weird here. I think the original thought would be it was the USFL, XFL Bowl where you'd have Brian Scott here with the Vipers coming in, Kyle Slaughter. Different story now, right? We have Luis Perez, a friend of the podcast. Luis came on a couple weeks ago. Love having Luis. What do you make of him getting this spotlight here? I mean, I called him the Spring League Forrest Gump, and I meant that in all sincerity. Of this man has been a part of the AAF and the XFL 2020, and he was with the USFL, and I was back with this, and he's with the Rams. What do you make of Luis Perez getting this kickoff date?
Yeah, that was an all-time highlight. Hearing you call him the springtime Forrest Gump to him on the interview, I laughed out loud in my kitchen when I heard that on the podcast. But in regards to him, look, time is a flat circle, man. We were here a year ago, and he was starting for the New Jersey Generals in Birmingham. I've seen him, as I mentioned before. I saw him in person play against the San Diego Fleet for the Birmingham Iron. Now 4 years ago. I mean, it's like time immemorial. Like he's always around here. He's always finding a way to stay in these leagues and stay consistent. But I mean, obviously, it shows not only his work ethic, but also just his ability to kind of adapt to all these situations. He is so malleable, and I have to give him all the credit in the world for going through all these different leagues and all these different changes and all these different coaches and all these different schemes and just managing to just keep himself so steady and all that. So it's really a testament to him.
It's incredible. So everyone check it out. We got a lot of people hopping on here. Andy's going to be riding with me the whole day. We have lots of special guests calling in. Dorothy's going to be calling in. She's going to do it outside the stadium report here later on. One thing to keep in mind, we did cross our 2,500 subscriber giveaway last week. So we're mailing out, as you know, speaking of Brian Scott, we're going to be mailing that out to a lucky winner. I have a lot of Spring League merchandise we're giving away as well. But the big giveaway now, 3,500 subscribers. We're already 2,500 and change. You get to 3,500 by the end of the XFL season. I think we can do it. You get either 2 tickets to the XFL championship game or 2 tickets to the USFL championship game if you would want that as well. I'm going to buy you tickets. I said on the podcast last week, we're not going to Jordan Love mom you and put you in the back of the stadium. Like, I'll get you decent tickets here for the championship game. But make sure you like and subscribe. Ton of work. Andy riding with me all day. Everybody else. And it seems like people are excited. We got a lot of comments coming in. Andy, are you feeling palpable? I know we're in our chat. You guys have your news chat as well. I mean, it doesn't feel real. It's 3 years here. I don't know if it feels real yet.
It really doesn't. I just thought we'd be in this perpetual time loop of like continuing to talk about it and nothing actually really happening. It's felt that way with my fellow writers, with you, with some of my friends, and for this finally to culminate after like 3 years, after all the things that have happened. You could write a book on what happened in the last 3 years with no football being played since the last game that kicked off, and for finally to kind of get to this moment, it still doesn't. And it's weird considering that there was so much anticipation, so much starting and stopping along the way. And I don't know, I'm still trying to kind of articulate how I'll feel during the kickoff. Like, I have no idea what my emotion's going to be. The last time I watched the XFL, to be honest, I was still kind of, I was still kind of being sold the idea of spring football. I was still not quite there as everyone else was at that time. I'd gone to the AAF and seen what happened there, but I was convinced by it after the XFL had its run in 2020. And I don't know. I'm curious to see how my emotional response is once the game finally kicks off.
Yeah, I don't know. And if people don't know, if you're hopping on that, like I was not even really the biggest football fan. Like I live in Seattle, Dorothy and I, and like I covered the Seahawks, and they went to the Super Bowl, and I was at the Fox station and did a lot of that. And but I famously didn't know who Richard Sherman was. I had to go interview him. That was kind of an interesting. But the XFL got me into where now I would consider myself a diehard NFL fan. And it was funny to me. It's always been interesting to me that it worked the other way, that it was being able to watch games outside of my market, teams that I didn't necessarily follow, was really exciting. And it was the XFL and having those, 4 games a weekend and 8 teams. And I can track that. That's kind of a tangible thing. Now we're insane. And we have the CFL and the USFL and everything else. But, weird, like you, Andy, that you said, XFL 2020, sold you on it. And XFL 2020 really sold me on football as a concept that I want to watch all year round. So.
Yeah, no. And I mean, that's something that honestly, I'd always wanted when I was younger, when I was a teenager, because once the NFL season ended and the Pro Bowl kind of rolled through, I just thought, all right, now what do I do? And I remember one of the things I used to do to fill my time, besides watching NFL Network ad nauseum, to the point where my parents were probably concerned in terms of not spending enough time on my studies, was I remember watching NFL Europe when that was still around. I remember watching that. That didn't last forever, obviously. And just kind of thinking like, okay, is there a way to be able to keep playing football in these different months and be able to keep it in my life? And that's when I realized that was like the sport I loved dearly more than any other. But still, when I started to see the idea of the Spring League, I wasn't sure if that was like a concept that I could really gel with, or if there's something that needed to be there, more that needed to be there. But I think it's honestly fortified my knowledge of football in a lot of ways. It's really colored in a lot of niches, a lot of things about like whether it be coaching or whether it be scheme or whether it's just following players and really getting into some of the nitty gritty that I could always learn more. And I always think I learn more just by being around these leagues.
We got a question here. Jason wants to know, how are ticket sales looking? Last I checked, they were good. So We're at the Texas Live here. I've paid, and maybe Andy, you could pull it up and look. I paid for the premium internet here, so obviously, we can make sure the stream goes. For whatever reason, the hotel Wi-Fi has locked us out of Ticketmaster. Like they think that I'm a bot or whatever, and I've tried looking at it on my phone as well. So well worth having the stream today. But last I checked, Renegades looked really good. The obviously the Brahmas game I think is close to, if not a sellout. I know Houston was lacking a little bit, but it seems like they picked up steam as well. Andy, any concern from you for any of the tickets?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that the Houston fans were not taking so quickly back to their to their Roughnecks, and I thought that was a little odd considering that that was the only undefeated team in the last iteration, and there was so much fanfare around that team. And look, maybe some of it has to do with perhaps their USFL neighbors that have now entered the fray. Now, I know they're not technically there physically playing games yet, but they are in the cultural zeitgeist as far as existing. So I don't know if that's part of it, but I was a little surprised that didn't take as well. Orlando, we'll see, if they come along eventually. If we're gonna, obviously the San Antonio, the Alamo Dome looks awesome. Like that, it looks incredible. I really wanted to get down there for that game this weekend. I couldn't make it quite happen. I was gonna go from Arlington to San Antonio. That was my original plan before things changed. I still, I'm wondering about. I'm really wondering if Houston's going to be able to kind of pull their weight, but everyone else seems to be doing okay so far. And then obviously we'll get into more of these numbers next week once we start going to the other venues.
Yeah, what did you make of and I didn't really take any offense to it, but the Houston, was it the Houston mayor and like the mayor's office welcoming the Roughnecks home? I thought that was great. I think they called it Coach Wade Phillips Day or whatever. I mean, it seems fine to me. I know I saw some people in the USFL and hey, the gamblers were there and all that. This is a big step. I mean, I asked Danny Garcia when we stood at that very stadium back in July, and I said, what it makes you feel like you can succeed here? We're the USFL. She said, well, we're playing the games in the stadium. We're going to be there. That's the difference. We're going to build that camaraderie that way. We're going to put the time in and do these events. And it looks like it paid off. Max here is saying, I'm pretty sure Houston taking so long because not everyone near as much local engagement as Houston compared to the other returning markets. Yeah, I mean, they had all the training camps and all that stuff there back in 2020. I think that helped with that, knowing the championship game was going to be there. I don't know. I mean, Arlington obviously feels like the new Houston with everything based out of here, but I'm not super concerned. Are you concerned?
No, I think it'll just take a moment to kind of almost like turning the lights back on, and then essentially like people, walking past the business and being like, oh, they're back in business. Cool. And then sort of going back into the building. Again, as you kind of alluded to a couple of times, even with people in your area in Seattle, not everyone is kind of keenly aware that the Dragons are back. Some people are still kind of getting used to the idea of it still being a thing. I mean, granted, again, that this league only existed for like 5 weeks. It wasn't as much time as it was to make an impact on a lot of people. It didn't make an impact on everyone. Even in their own communities. So it's going to take some time for people to kind of realize that things are back and operating again.
It's interesting. I actually had a gentleman at the hotel this morning because we went down and grabbed breakfast, and he said, "Oh, that's a Dragons jersey from 2020." There's the college baseball World Series, I think, is here. Don't quote me on that, but it's like I see a lot of Arkansas baseball fans here, and I think Texas Longhorns. I don't know, a lot of baseball talk here at the Rangers Stadium, but he was not here for the XFL, and he said, "Oh, I know that jersey." So like, it's still there, but it's like trying to turn back on. I am very concerned. I am concerned for the Thursday game here in Seattle. I don't know. I know we have things going on at Lumen Field and people are eating on the field with nice dinners, but we'll see how that works as well. San Antonio looking close to 30,000 tomorrow. Wow, that would be I think if we get the lower bowl packed here for the first couple weeks and it looks good on TV, I think that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that's really the biggest goal, right? Just kind of filling out a lower bowl section. You don't have look. We'll worry about filling the top later. That's a distant goal, I think, for some of these teams. I know St. Louis goes on and on and on about filling the Battle Dome, but that's something that's one step at a time, I think. But for San Antonio, that's great. I mean, that's around the number that they had for Commanders games back in 2019. They did a great job filling in the stadium that way. And I think that's another good sign for them. And I mean, that's two really, not only is it San Antonio fans, but I mean, it's the Battlehawks coming. That's a really raucous fan base. Honestly, that's a great matchup for them because you'll probably have some Battlehawk fans that'll travel and go into that game as well. So I think that could be a really, really great atmosphere. That might be, in my opinion, like if it wasn't for Arlington, that would be the other game that I would have on first because I think that is such a cool setting and such a cool matchup in this weekend, this opening slate.
What are we looking forward to today? So we talked a little bit about Luis Perez coming on there. What are you making? And we're going to have Anthony calling in here. We can talk Renegades as well. But what are you looking for from the Bob Stoops side of the field?
I'm looking for him to kind of have a little bit more of a smoother operation than he did in 2020. Obviously, he put a lot of stock into Landry Jones that season, and Landry just unfortunately could not stay healthy during that season. There was a lot of inconsistency at the quarterback position. Now, it's funny because we are kind of up in the air as who's going to really be playing most of the snaps under center for this team for most of the season. The depth chart obviously lists the one that we got our hands on lists Drew Plitt or Kyle Sloter, which is not something I usually see from the quarterback position. I don't see a big or any position in that matter. I don't see that being used in any case. So I think for this case, I think it's going to be important for them to establish the run. I think they're going to be allowing their run game to kind of speak more for itself. I see them playing, kind of utilizing their entire roster, which I think you've talked to Anthony Miller, one of the other writers. He's obviously gone on about the depth on this team as far as like special teams, defense, offense. I think they're going to try really hard to keep it consistent and just kind of not try to do too much today. Vegas, we'll see. I mean, I know Luis Perez is not a gunslinger. He's not a guy you really take shots with, but I am really curious to see how aggressive they are today and kind of trying to make a statement in this first game. I could see Rod Woodson trying some really unconventional stuff just to kind of like announce like, hey, I'm here on the scene. I'm ready to do this thing. I'm a head coach. I could see that as well.
Well, we have a couple call-ins here. Vince, we have All Football Scout was coming on, was going to hop on. Vince can talk, all different things. And then we have Anthony here, Anthony Miller, who might be, I'm going to be competing with him for best dressed here at the XFL game coming up here in a little bit. We have Vince, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll have Anthony say hi as well.
Hey, everybody. My name's Vince. I run an alternate football scouting report, or alternate football scout now. I dropped the scouting report part. On Twitter and Instagram, basically been covering all these other leagues for the past 3 years since the XFL shut down, and very happy to be back here at Kickoff again 3 years later. It's kind of crazy.
And then we have Anthony here. We did our deep dive Renegades. Really did well on the YouTube traffic between you and Coach Jaime. We had like 11,000 views on that video, which was not too shabby at all. We have Anthony Miller covering the Renegades today. I figured it's easier for you to call in than come up here and crash the suite. How are you doing, Anthony?
I am good. I'm currently sitting in the parking lot outside of Choctaw Stadium, so I'm just excited to get back to covering this team for the first time in 3 years.
Do you think that Bob Stoops and them, you think they're going to be coming back with a lot of fire? What have you made? You did a really good job on the interview we had a couple weeks ago. What do you make of the team that they've assembled? And what do you make of, Drew Plitt or Kyle Sloter?
So I like what Bob Stoops has done. I think he's built a better team this time around. And I think it's more about having scheme fits. I think back in 2020, he was trying to run the air raid offense with Hal Mummy, and I don't think he had the right pieces in place to really run that offense, especially with Landry Jones. I think this time around, having John Hayes and Chuck Long running that offense, being a more balanced attack while running the spread offense, I think it's kind of fits their MO a lot better, especially having Keith Ford and Devion Smith carrying the load at the running back position. I think those were great moves. I think there's two great running backs that are going to really carry this rushing attack. In terms of the quarterbacks, I mean, it definitely seems like Drew Plitt's going to be the guy, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I think it's a surprising move just because Bob Stoops is more known for going with a veteran quarterback, so that's why I thought maybe Kyle Sloter had the edge. But Drew Plitt's got a lot of upside. I mean, he's a smaller quarterback than Kyle Sloter is, but has great mobility, played really well in preseason with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think he has – I kind of think that John Hayes and Chuck Long see – Drew Plitt as like a younger Jordan Ta'amu and maybe want to develop him to get onto his level. So I'm really interested to see how Drew Putt's going to play today. He's got a lot of upside, but I have a feeling he probably has a little bit of a short leash. If it goes wrong, then they're probably going to go with Kyle Soda and throw him in there.
Vince, what do you make of this? We talked before you guys hopped on a little bit, Brian Scott, now it's Luis Perez. I know you're excited to see, Luis, and I think we all are excited to see him get another shot. What do you make of this matchup here?
I mean, it's I'm not gonna lie, I haven't dug too deep into all the other rosters and everything, but more or less, I mean, I'm hoping that we get just balanced games across the board, good quality football out of everybody, and overall a enjoyable competition. At the end of the day, these leagues need a quality product on the field more than anything, and the last thing we want to see is somebody go out there lay an egg. So. Hoping that that's really what we're seeing. I'm excited to see. Is Luis Perez get the nod for Vegas?
He did, yeah. And we had a lot of questions about that. We had a lot of questions where, we brought in Brett Huntley, and there was reports that he was the highest paid quarterback in the league, and I think it was like $200,000, which, compared to XFL 2020 money, Landry Jones was getting like $750,000 or whatever that was back in 2020. So certainly not, the same level, more. But I just don't think he's made it into camp far enough yet. Andy, am I missing anything on that? Just not enough time for him to gel, and you presume here week 2, 3, whatever, we see Brett Huntley get the start?
Yeah, Huntley is plenty talented, but I think it's just timing-wise. And I think that might happen with some additions here as the season goes along, especially the quarterback position. There just needs to be time to sort of acclimate to what's going on in the culture and the locker room, in the playbook, all of that. And I think Luis, again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, he's so steady. He's able to kind of be so malleable and continue to be through all these different situations. And, yeah, he's played with other quarterbacks. I mean, him and DeAndre Johnson were, playing handoff basically every time they were on the field for New Jersey. They're like, here, you take it. No, you take it. And so that's kind of, if Luis can sort of be amicable in that situation, then I think him being able to start is great. But at some point, I don't know if we see Brett Huntley in this game. That would be really interesting, but I could see him more coming in like week 2, week 3 if necessary.
Anthony, what do you make of how they've done here so far, marketing here in Arlington, and building the hub and getting the fan support? I mean, we haven't been exhaustively walking around here the last 2 days, but it hasn't been super palpable, right? But I know the tickets are sold. So what do you make of how they've done?
So I think they've done a really good job in terms of having the open practice, and then I know they just had an event at a mall about a week ago. So they've been able to have a lot of community events, and they've done a really good job of it. I think they visited one of the children's hospitals yesterday. So they're getting out there in the community. In terms of like media coverage and stuff like that, honestly, it hasn't been that great out here in Arlington. I think it's just because this is the second time they've gone through this. First time around, there wasn't as much coverage on it either. So they really had to do a lot of work in terms of like fan engagement events, which I will say Arlington, the Renegades have done a really good job of, and they're getting a good amount of people coming out to them. So they're going to have to organically build that way, because I'm not really seeing it as much on the media side.
Vince, what do you make of this? And they said at the end of the Player 54, The Rock had, and I don't know if you guys had a chance, really cool, and just seeing The Rock, and I like the cussing, and it seemed a little bit more real. The Rock, James has a question here. The Rock being he said they're going to be at every home game this weekend. Obviously putting the miles on the private jet. What do you make of that and the commitment they're showing from Danny and The Rock in leadership?
I mean, I think that's excellent. That's the face of the league right there. He should be at every single game, and it's looking like every single game is going to have really, really strong showings. So, you want to have a really good first impression when you have packed stadiums across the league in week 1. And if he's showing face everywhere, I think that just is a better chance of it kind of sticking with everybody. Someone brings the family out and it's like, oh, The Rock's here. And like the local team won and they look really good. Like, that turns, a week 1 fan into a full season fan, which is crucial in this next 2 days here.
Andy, have we gotten what was promised now with The Rock and promotion and everything? I mean, it's people waited, and I know we were kind of waiting for the right time. Have we gotten what we were promised here? Have they done enough?
Oh, well, I don't see Black Adam 2 being advertised next weekend, so I think so. He won't be getting in the way of his schedule, but this definitely speaks to the whole thing about them having 3 teams in Texas, right? All teams are playing in Texas this weekend, so he can, amicably travel around to each game, and then obviously fly out to the DC game on Sunday night, which he has time to do as well. But I mean, I think some of the promotion leading up to it, like the XFL Player 54 documentary that aired earlier this week, seeing him and kind of get more into sort of the nitty gritty of his lifestyle and where he came from and how he got here and what sort of mentality he had the whole time, along with Danny Garcia. I think I've seen more of that. I think it's good to see that it's finally coming out. We were waiting for a lot of that, but I do think as far as lead up goes, it's been solid. I think he's done a solid job. But my curiosity now is, all right, how do you continue to do that throughout the season? And also after the season ends, like what happens then? I want to see what kind of engagement he does once all this sort of rolls through as a full-time guy.
We have here, I wanted to pull up, we got Anthony here, will come back on again. And it's going to be, if you guys got Andy's riding with me all day, Vince, whatever, people, if you got to hop out, we'll hop out. I want to we've had a couple questions here about, odds, who's winning. As I describe my screen here, we have the Vipers 3-point favorite today, right? On that, am I looking at that right? And what do you guys, do you think that that's fair here? Over under 36.5?
I don't think anybody can honestly give an accurate answer of it. It's all brand new teams with brand new coaching staffs, even if there's some familiarity with some people. All in all, this is still everybody's first live game as these teams. So, we can all speculate on how good a team is going to be, how bad a team is going to be. Like, I couldn't honestly tell you who I think's got the edge in anywhere right now because none of these teams have played football together yet. At least, a live game. I know they played a couple of scrimmages, but I didn't see those. I don't know if anybody did. So yeah, I think we'll see.
Andy, what do you make of that? And have we given enough? We've done, extra weeks of training camp. That was one of our criticisms. We were down at the USFL and, it had like 2.5 weeks, I think, of training camp kind of first go around last time. Are we expecting better product on the field today, kind of having that extended time?
Well, considering some of it got cut short because of a snowstorm, that is a bit of a handicap they're dealing with. But I do think that there has been a decent amount of time allocated to the players and the coaches trying to gel here. I mean, it's still going to take time. Like ultimately, it's going to take a few weeks before anyone really starts to gel and chemistry starts to be there. Now, those who have kind of like the game plans right out of the gate, like we saw last year with the Generals and the Stallions, they seemed to know who exactly they were immediately. Yet all the other teams were not really able to get that footing immediately. And some of them, it took some time to sort of figure that out as the season went along, obviously because of injuries or because of playing time. But it's going to take time for all these teams to gel. Even if they had months of lead up, I still think it would have taken time just based on them never having played together. I mean, that's the thing. Like the thing that's so consistent in a product like the NFL, for example, is there are at least some players who are held over from previous regimes or coaches that are held over from the season before, and they know each other. They have, some sort of chemistry. You might add pieces here and there, but like for the most part, the foundation is there. Whereas with this, I mean, it's all new people. It's all brand new people. You have no idea how it's going to look week 1. And quite frankly, you don't know how it's going to look in week 10, and you don't know what's going to look like in the it's going to all kind of have to gel and take time to gel. So regardless of how much time they had leading up to it, I don't know if that really mattered in the grand scheme of things because it's all brand new people working together.
We have another person ready to join us here, the media darling making the rounds here. We'll see. There we go. Let the audio spin there. We have Pat Ruffino here, XFL News Hub. How are you doing, Pat?
I'm a little tired, but woke up from my nap just to do this today. I'm really excited.
We're getting a little bit of background noise. I'm not sure if you're hitting your desk or something. So just be careful.
How about now? Can you guys get me now?
Yeah. Let's see here. I can hear something going on in the background. Do you have headphones you can plug in?
They're in my car. Let me take out my mic and just go off the computer.
Okay, let's get Pat back in here. This is when we got a live episode today. It's going to be fun with all that. Yeah, Jared, we got you here. I mean, I do this stuff for a living. Besides the Arlington Vipers game today, right? Obviously, we have Orlando coming into Houston. Are we down. There's been lots of comments, everything. Andy, how are we feeling about the Guardians here? I watched the Player 54 gave Trump Buckley, kind of gave him a good, like, oh, this is, but we're kind of scared now. I don't know how good they're going to be.
I mean, look, we have no idea. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like a Pittsburgh Maulers operation. I think some people have already started drawing that comparisons. I don't think it's going to be that level, but I do think there's a lot more question marks as far as who's going to be playing quarterback. Obviously, Paxton Lynch is getting the nod there, but does DeAndre Francois sneak in there? There's a lot of FCF people on that team. Obviously, that's a big deal for a lot of people, like Andrew Ramil, for example. And I don't know, like their defense, I assume it'll be okay. A lot of people are predicting a lot of low scores from the Guardians. Like people are, as far as if we're talking about betting numbers, a lot of people are pretty much slamming the under on that game this weekend. But I don't know. Like again, I think I like to see what Terrell Buckley's got. Let's see what he can scheme up. But as far as like talent goes, maybe it's not as proficient as some of these other teams. Maybe there's just not as many playmakers or people that others are fans of. I think it's going to take. We'll see. I think it's going to take until tomorrow to really see what the operation's like.
Let me get Vince's thoughts on Paxton Lynch, and then we'll try Pat again here. He did fine USFL, coming in here, and the Guardians needed something. I mean, I don't know if it was Paxton Lynch or whatever, or maybe we could have transferred Brian Scott before all that went down. But what do you make of Paxton coming in here to the Guardians late season ad or late camp ad?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when a QB comes in with significantly less time with the team and somehow still gets the starting job. So, that can be indicative of what the QB play was really like before he got there. But at the same time, it could have also very much just been like, oh, it's Paxton Lynch. It's a big name guy. Let's just go with him. Let's bring him in. Let's go with him. So, there's a good chance that he comes out and he actually does all right. I mean, he played pretty well in a handful of games in the USFL. He was better than Shea Patterson was to start out the season there. Right? He was with Michigan towards the end of the season, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's possible that he comes in and actually plays pretty well. I mean, he was projected to be a really good professional athlete at one point. It didn't pan out for him in the NFL. He bounced around. I think he had some CFL stints as well. I don't know if he ever got to really play, but, really we'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised if after a couple of weeks, they go in another direction because, they bring him in, they give him the start after having less time. And maybe they're like, you know what, maybe like one of these guys that we have here has better chemistry with the people here. We got to give him a chance. Orlando seemed to have built their team around a lot of fan-controlled players. To me, it felt like, he really wanted DeAndre Francois because my understanding, he was the first QB selected by them. And then, Francois obviously wanted the guys he's been playing with the past couple of years. Andrew Jamil, handful of other fan-controlled receivers, and I think they have one of the running backs from there too. He wanted the playmakers that he was comfortable around him. So I think that Francois will end up playing some point this year. And I think, if it doesn't work with Paxton Lynch, I think, he's going to have the chemistry with the playmakers there. So he's, should probably get the nod at some point, but, we'll see how that works out. If you watched him in the spring league in 2021, when he went back outdoors, it was a very, very, very different result than how it was when he was playing in fan control.
All right, let's bring in Pat here again. We'll give this one more shot here. Pat, we'll unmute you here, and we'll get that. You got to choose to unmute there, Pat. And we'll get this one more time. This is good. There we go. Pat, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Round two on this. I think I said it this morning. I feel more excited about today than Christmas morning.
Yeah, Pat, what is the vibe for you? And you've been in the group chats and stuff as well. We're talking with Andy. It just feels like it's been such a journey we've all been on here, and we've obviously been gotten to know each other here over the time. But to finally be here today and be 2.5 hours from kickoff, what do you make of it?
I mean, it kind of feels like all that arm crossing and all that overzealous I was player number 54 doesn't matter anymore, right? I've been kind of critical of that kind of term of marketing for the league, but but now that we got players and coaches as we've had since the middle of last year, it's all kind of real now. I think with the USFL, we kind of Colin Cowherd said it in November, and then all of a sudden we had a league in February, and you're just like, yeah, why would this not be real, at least for one season? This has just had such a dramatic buildup since they bought the team, they bought the league for 15 mil, that it's finally here. And, I think they've done a pretty good job of it.
It's remarkable to me during the Player 54. I think it was when Russ Brandon was talking with everyone, and we were at Texas Live. I had a couple of shiners there yesterday. It kind of felt like I was viewing, this like moment of history, like where all this went down. But Russ Brandon, right, president, talking, we had 8 employees or 10 employees last year. We have 812, whatever employees this year at the same time. Remarkable to me, the league building that's been going on, and to think about, all these, men, women here and in Seattle and in St. Louis and all of that. Vince, comparing and I don't want to be critical of the USFL all the time, but it does feel like secondhand work sometimes, right? Okay, we're going to do the NFL on Fox 7 hours a day, and then we'll do the USFL 1 hour a day on social. What do you make of just 800 plus people here now working for the XFL, buying in and being here and everything else to go with it?
Yeah, I think the USFL provided a great opportunity and still does, but I think ultimately, I think XFL has just done way more groundwork for building a fan base, building fan bases within the cities that their teams are in. I live in New Jersey, born and raised in New Jersey. I haven't seen a single bit of advertising for the Generals anywhere at all, like at any point since, the launch of the USFL. And we were a playoff team. We won the Northern Division, you know what I mean? And I didn't see a single flag banner advertisement, no local advertising, nothing. Whereas XFL, their social media accounts are actively, they're trash talking each other at this point a little bit, but they're just engaging with fans. They're all over the place. Whereas even USFL's social media presence just isn't really as strong. I feel like the XFL has really put a lot more of an emphasis on building their fan base, because I think their financial plan is more around actually having a strong fan base. The USFL really has been built around the fact that Fox owns the league and they just need the viewership. So as long as they have, the right marketing or right, advertising deals going at the time, and just to putting games on in prime time in the off season, they're getting some of the viewership marks they need to hit. They're not really that concerned with packing the stands. You saw that, especially at the end of the season in Birmingham. Even for Birmingham games, the attendance wasn't amazing. It was still strong, but it wasn't like what it was week 1. Whereas, the XFL, you're looking at St. Louis doesn't even have their first home game until week 4. Or week 5, maybe. I think their first 4 home games are on the road, and they're already almost sold out in the first ring of the Dome. And you know that if the Battlehawks are one of the top teams, they're probably going to have that second ring opened up by the time they even get to their first home game, and they'll be looking to actually, have that large presence of fans in place. Whereas USFL just isn't really that interested in that. It seems, you've got Pittsburgh and New Jersey playing in Canton, Ohio. How many people are? I'm not going to be driving out to Canton every weekend to see the see the Generals play, and I don't think anybody in New Jersey will. And maybe once or twice, but that's it.
Pat, what do you make of this? We were talking yesterday. USFL announcing, right, they're doing their college draft next week. It feels kind of like the CFL negotiation list, where okay, we can draft this player's rights if they choose to come to the league. These people aren't on training camp rosters. I know that you've been covering it and going back and forth with the league, and it feels like they're trying to step up here a little bit. Hey, we have some news. We're working on this. What do you make of this USFL college draft on Tuesday morning, I guess?
I'm very curious to see who's eligible. You know what I mean? Is the kid from Townsend eligible? Is Bryce Young technically eligible? I feel one of the biggest factors of success with the USFL is this gentleman in Memphis. I forget his name, but I feel like he's kind of got a lot of star power behind him, and was a big reason why they came back to Memphis. So I'd like to see a splash with him, and I think that could really catapult the league. I've been very vocal in saying, when we talk about the longevity of both these leagues, is I I think both leagues are a minimum of 3 years, and then every time you add an owner, it adds another year to the longevity of it. So I think that's the next step. I mean, I'm not in love with the college draft, but it's something, and it puts the league in a positive direction. And as long as both these leagues go into every day, I think we're going to be good to go in the long term.
Andy, over under, we're podcasting Tuesday morning here. I think we're going to do an XFL recap show Tuesday morning. Are you excited for the college draft?
I mean, it's certainly a different aspect of how to collect player talent, but I don't know how well it's going to go. It's like basically like the CFL negotiation list, right? It's just basically like trying to add names and trying to like put in like certain rights holds on certain people. So I don't know if it's really going to work in that manner. We'll see how well it works, but I'm always good for looking at prospects and looking at different potential landing spots for players, but I don't know how well it's going to really operate in terms of like being able to convince people to say, hey, this is a really viable option for you. Whereas, what the gold standard is, which is people trying to get into the NFL and people trying to get into other methods. So I don't know if that's going to really work out, but you know what? It's worth a shot. I think it's worth a shot and see if it actually does end up holding water and if it's going to work out for this league.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, are these players, it says, every player eligible, like, do we have to have conversations with them ahead of time, or do we just, like I said, the CFL can put, Tom Brady on their, I mean, not anymore, but, you put whoever on your negotiations list, and that means you ever choose to go up to Canada and play, okay, they get first dibs on that. It just feels we're not adding them to the camp. Most of the rosters are full already. How long does that last? Are their rights assigned for the next 4 years? Like it feels very weird. Pat, have you gotten any more like insight from that and from people you've talked to in the league? And I would be surprised if you have. I'm just curious if you have.
Very limited. I've talked to a couple players who claim they're eligible, and we kind of went back and forth a little bit like that. And I was like, okay, did you get a letter or something like that or email? And they're like, well, no, but they said I was good to go. And then, do you guys remember last year when Curtis Collins, he was a linebacker from Fan Control Football, he tweeted, I am like eligible, or I'm declaring for the USFL draft. And about like 30 other dudes started doing it. And we all start sliding into everyone's DMs like, oh, so you got like a letter or something like that? Like, and I'm kind of getting a little bit of that vibe. I mean, if I'm the USFL, I swing straight for the fences and I pick up Stetson Bennett, who, if the team needs someone. I don't think, I've talked to a couple people about him, and I don't think he really cares about playing football. I think he's good. He's going to go sell insurance or something like that, or deliver mail, whatever he's going to do. But I think having like a big game like that could be, as close as you can get it to like the Doug Flutie, Herschel Walker, Steve Young type situation.
I remember, the thing last year, there were draft eligible, and I think that was still when Brian Woods was RIP, pour one out for, not real death, but pour one out for Brian Woods here with the USFL. I texted Brian, I'm like, hey, what's going on? All these players say, yeah, that's not accurate. I was like, okay, good to know. And I liked having someone kind of in the league there that I could text and get reliable information back like that. I don't want to poo-poo too much on the USFL today. Vince, the 4 matchups this weekend, which one are you most looking forward to if we want to spin it to a positive direction right now?
I'm excited to see San Antonio, honestly. I'm just excited to see the Alamo Dome just packed to the brim with people. But I mean, and San Antonio has AJ Smith as the offensive coordinator, I want to say.
AJ is with Roughnecks.
Yeah.
Oh, he's with the Roughnecks. Okay, so then I'm excited to see the Roughnecks because I like AJ Smith a lot. I remember when he was the wide receivers coach and just watching his career go up from the spring league and everything. He's someone I'm really excited to see his offensive system, back in action. I know they got Cole McDonald is one of the QBs there, right? Is he their starter?
Not yet. Okay. Brandon Silvers is supposed to start, but there's supposedly a quick coming for our Silvers if things don't go well. So a lot of people, including me, who actually went ahead and drafted Cole McDonald in my fantasy draft, are anticipating that will happen at some point.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Jack Cohen's he's over with the Brahmas. Yeah, Andy, what do we make of he followed me on Twitter yesterday. He claims I'm sitting there on the plane, I get this notification like Brandon Silvers follows you on Twitter. And I just remember back to when Paul and I show, 2 years ago was the guy on The Bachelor that looked kind of like Brandon Silvers if you close your eyes. And I don't know if any of you guys remember that. And it was Jason Nick. It was a fake name, right? If this is like old school Markcast lore at this point. And I tried for weeks to get Brandon Silvers on because I think he was with the Spring League at that point. And that now I whether he plays or plays well or not, I'm going to be hitting up Brittany over with the Roughnecks and getting the Brandon Silvers request on there. But Andy, what did you make of him being named QB1? And like you said, with probably a really short hook.
I think, again, it's just sort of going steady with the veteran presence. That's what a lot of these teams are doing. That's why Luis Perez is probably getting the nod today. It's why I thought Kyle Sloter was going to get the nod today, but he's not. It's Drew Plitt. But it's consistency. It's basically, look, he has an opportunity to do some great things in this offense. AJ Smith, I think, is going to do a great job utilizing all the skill and talent that they have in that offense. I'm really excited to see guys like Bryson Aline and Max Borghi. I'm really, really excited to see their running backs in this scheme. For Silvers, he's going to have the support he needs to be successful. So it's up to him. But I understand why he gets the start because, like Perez, he's just been in all these different leagues. He's been in all these different systems with all these different coaches. He's been very malleable and being able to be in all these different places. So I do think that's why he's getting the start. But in terms of the ceiling for these guys, I think Cole McDonald clearly has the higher ceiling and maybe the highest ceiling of any quarterback in the league. People are really, really high on him. I've been interested in him ever since he was playing in Hawaii. I've always liked his skill set. Even when he was coming out, there were a lot of scouts that were taking note of him going into the draft. It just didn't work out one way or another, but I can tell there's something there with that. So we'll see. But for Silvers, I'm not surprised that he's getting the start as far as being steady-handed, but let's see how the offense runs tonight.
Well, real quick, I want to say, I think in 2021, Silvers was with the Conquerors in the
Conquerors
as well. So he does have a lot of experience in this offensive system as well. So, and I don't know if they grabbed any of the wide receivers from there either. I know a lot of those Spring League guys are still in the mix between these leagues now. And I think Cole McDonald was with the Conquerors very briefly as well too at one point. So I think they both got experience. Yeah, in 2020, he came in for the last game or something like that.
But I don't think he was with AJ Smith. Smith. Okay. So that's where this big connection comes, in my opinion. And I know, Reed, you had AJ on there. Is the continuation of the AJ Smith to Brandon Silvers connection, and that's what I'm excited about. I personally do think Cole McDonald is better than Brandon Silvers, but I do think there is veteran clout that should be taken into account. Because I personally feel it's a lot easier to go from Brandon Silvers to Cole McDonald, not Cole McDonald to Brandon Silvers,
Yeah. I'll go. Keep going on. Sorry.
I just want to say, Andy, I really like you bringing up that Max Borghi kid because he's been kind of a fringe guy. So now it's okay, let's see why you're not in the NFL or why you should be in the NFL. So the fact that this guy is going to get out there and actually play football, we're not going to. And this is my favorite thing about these all football leagues is there's no Ryan Griffin quarterback, anymore because these guys are going to transition to the XFL or the USFL, play some games. Okay, you're not going to hang out and throw 3 pass attempts in 12 years in the NFL anymore, Cheech. We got someone else ready to go. So,
yeah, no, I'm excited for Borghi. I saw him play in the air raid offense with Mike Leach in Washington State, and he absolutely ripped it up. He was a nuisance to deal with as an Oregon Duck fan. I hated playing against him. He's really versatile. I cannot wait to see him get into the system and really show off his talent and skill set. But you're right. That's the thing about – I think that's the other thing to keep in mind for everybody here with all these quarterbacks and the running backs and receivers and all these positions. The margin for error and the margin for differences between these players talent-wise is not that big. And there's going to be opportunities for a lot of these guys. So even if you don't see X or Z player out there this weekend, it doesn't mean they're not going to play at some point during the season. It could very much play, a second half or the next week. So that's kind of that keep that in mind is that all of these guys at some point are going to get in there and show their stuff.
Yeah, I don't think the depth charts, and we tweeted a bunch of them out, or I think we finally got all 8 depth charts this week and put them out, released from the teams. Yeah, it's not going to be what it is the whole time. Cole McDonald got the spotlight at the Player 54, right? And showing that, and like, why did we go to Hawaii and do the showcase? Like, okay, we found Cole McDonald kind of thing. But we have a question here. I'm going to toss to, I did want to say as well. Yeah, I think Silver's same with the coaches. Silvers has done this a bunch. Same with like Mike Riley in the USFL or whatever. Like, we've been through this a couple times. We kind of know what we're doing. Here's a question from Mr. Downtown. We'll go to Vince first. Should the XFL focus on having high quality football or highlighting young talent to be the face of their league?
Both. I think that is exactly what this league needs to establish themselves. Those are literally like the two pillars of what this league needs to be built on. If you don't have good quality football, nobody is going to care about what you do. Ultimately, fans don't want to, at least for myself, I don't want to keep seeing, the same 7-8 guys just trotted out that have never really panned out over and over again. Like, I don't want to see another Johnny Manziel revival in a league like this. Some of the quarterbacks that are getting the nod are kind of guys like that. But ultimately, if they're not the answer, they get taken off, the field, and then someone else comes in. So, there may be some veteran QBs that start these, the season out that we're going to end up ultimately getting switched out on. So, at the end of the day, though, you need both. You really do need both, with a league like this.
I'll toss to Pat, and then we'll get Andy's thoughts.
Look at some of these USFL guys that we've seen succeed, right? Scooby Wright would be a retread. DeMarcus Gates, Mike Abernathy. So I'm big. I don't really care about the young talent. I don't really care. I care about good football because – Kevontae Turpin's almost 25, and what did he do? 4 or 5 leagues before he got to the Cowboys. So that's a guy, I know he had off the field issues, but that's a guy, if you looked on paper, you'd be like, and just at the surface level as a casual fan, you'd be like, I don't really care about this dude. Like, he played for the ELF and the FCF and the IFL and this and that. It's like, so, quality football is the reason why the USFL, one of the reasons why the USFL is coming back, because, there's that other stuff, but it was good football, once it got up to speed. So if the XFL is just putting out like good stories and whatnot, yeah, that's cool, but you're not legitimizing yourself as an actual league, whether it be for development or the standalone. So I don't care how old these players are. I think the older they are, the better the story is.
I think it's a good mix. I just don't want to. I don't want to overpay for people. That's what I want, right? Yeah. I'm happy with the guy that never got the shot, and that I've been overlooked and all that. I just don't want to overpay. I don't think. We learned. I think we learned XFL 2020, like the Cardell Jones and Landry Jones and all that, not worth the money. Andy, your thoughts on this? Because your face lit up when I put this question on the screen. So.
Because I love the question. Well, I actually, as Vince should be familiar with as a Guardians fan, I don't know how many Matt McGloin stories we really want to tread through this season, even early on. It makes for great interviews, but I don't know how many times we want that to happen throughout the season. I think you need both, and specifically, I think you need to know that you can establish new names. And I'll give you case in point. Well, 2 of them actually. In 2020 with the XFL, look, the Houston Roughnecks drafted Connor Cook, number 2 overall. Thought that was going to be their guy. It ended up being PJ Walker. Nobody forgets PJ Walker because PJ Walker was outstanding, and everyone roots for him every single time he gets into a game with the Carolina Panthers. Last season in the CFL, look, we didn't know how Nathan Rourke was going to do. Michael Carter retired. We're not sure if Nathan Rourke's going to do anything, and
I knew he was going to be great. I knew he was.
Okay, sure. You knew you were a fortune teller. Fantastic. Maybe you should go into that business if this doesn't work out for you to be a psychic. But he absolutely ripped it up, and now every single Canadian CFL fan is lamenting that he left the league because now he's going south to the NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think the answer to that question is you need both. But I specifically think that you need to not be afraid to establish new names. Old names are great, and having people in the system that are familiar with the product and be able to latch onto those is great, like Martavis Bryant, like Michael Abernathy, like DeMarcus Gates. those kinds of guys, Jordan Tom, you need guys like that, but you also need to be able to establish new stars too. I think you should be able to establish that talent and make that known to the audience so they have something else, they have something new to latch onto. They have multiple options to consider.
We just got a lot of comments here. Jason says, home teams giving out rally titles. I did see that. We're wrapping here at 1, and then we're going to boogie across the street. So we'll try to get our hands on those rally towels. Just to kind of welfare check here. So 11:55 at noon, I have a couple more people joining. Pat, Vince, you're happy to hang out, go, whatever you need to do. We're going to have a couple more surprise guests, and then we have more people joining at 12:30 and 12:45. Dorothy is going to be calling in as well here from the stadium down there in a little bit. She's walking around. So lots more stuff, fun stuff to have here. Lots of comments, the Matt McGloins of the world, people calling him Matt McGoat. I think it's just because it's here's a good question. Rick Scott, we tossed to Pat first. This is the CFL issue, right, with the Nathan Rourke. You get a good guy in the XFL or the USFL, then they don't stick around anymore. But, I mean, how do you balance that between league building and truly wanting to give these players a shot?
I mean, how many college football programs are there? How many NFL programs are there? There's someone on an NFL roster right now, in my opinion, that could come in and replace, let's say, Te'amu, 20 touchdowns, 3 picks, 3,000 yards. There's someone out there that could replace Te'amu. So I don't think you care as much, because you got to balance it between, okay, there's a college guy who does he want to be a 4th round pick instead of going to the NFL and kind of Kyle Trasking it a little bit, come to us and light it up immediately versus the, hey man, I've been a backup for 3 years, a Ben DiNucci type situation. Let me go to the XFL. Let me go light it up. And let me show people that I'm good to go. So I think there's a balance, and there's constantly going to be a flux of people, ready to play quarterback, running back, whatever the position is that's going to make this league look good. And I think the league needs to do, and I didn't see this as much because I think we were in a transition type period, is when PJ Walker threw that 60-yard touchdown against the Falcons, that should have been all over the XFL Twitter page. Like anytime Kevontae Turpin moved 30 inches that way, the USFL did a good job of doing that. Or if like a player was active that week, we heard all about it and whatnot. I understand it was a time of transition, but I would have loved to see Parham's touchdown on there, Taylor Heineke doing stuff, like anyone who had a minute, just a little bit of success from 2020, make a tweet about it, because then all of a sudden you put hashtag Jets and some dude from New York who wasn't going to watch it is now like, hey, yo, this guy, So that's how they talk out there,
Specifically with that accent.
You said there was going to be a flux of talent. I almost thought our stream was going to get canceled there for a minute. I missed.
Oh man,
there. That's good. Vince, before you hop out as well here. We'll get this for everybody. Standout head coach of the XFL, right? Where everyone's excited to see Stoops return. Haslett's been. We've had mixed varieties of people being more excited, less excited. Who head coach for you? And we'll go around the horn here.
I'm excited to see Hines Ward as a head coach, honestly, and Rob Woodson. I know that it's a little I don't know if how much coaching the two of them have been doing. I know it was not at all the names I was expecting, but to see a couple of Hall of Famers that I grew up watching play, very interesting to see how they pan out as coaches. Because if this turns into the two of them becoming big time NFL coaches, then it'd be awesome to kind of watch their entire coaching career unfold as well.
We'll get Andy's thoughts, and I want to hear why it is or isn't Coach Beck's from Pat here.
I gotta go with Coach Beck, man.
Well, here, but Andy, who head coach you're excited to see?
I am actually excited to see Hines Ward as well. And I think because he's spent some time as a wide receivers coach, I know he's done it at lower levels, but I do think that there's something to be said about the culture that he comes from, the Steelers culture. I've always liked his mentality. I always liked him as a player. I was a really big fan of him when he was playing. I think he's going to be able to bring some of that grittiness down to San Antonio. I think he's a great fit for that scheme. Rod Woodson, I think he's just oozes enthusiasm. I think he's really, really into what he wants to do there and be part of the Vegas community. I'm really excited for him, just for him to get the shot. Honestly, that's really the biggest thing for him. But Becht is definitely a consideration, but for me, if it was a tier list, I think it would probably go Ward and then Woodson. I'm with Vince. I'm really excited to see those two.
We'll toss to Pat, and then we have another guest joining here in a second. Pat, you spent time talking with Becht and obviously covering the Battlehawks for News Hub. I think you're probably the most tuned in with that team, but obviously we know all that. Thoughts on Becht? Is he going to really excel here? I thought he came across really good in the Player 54 documentary this week.
Yeah, I mean, I have to choose Beck because, hopefully he follows me back on Twitter, right? So, as much free shilling I can do towards him. But I like the thing that I like about Beck most is actually not his football coaching ability. It's kind of the group of men he's brought into the room, and that there's a Missouri or a St. Louis tie. And when you're going to be in charge of St. Louis that has been scorned by the Cronkies and the Rams so much, I think just being aware of that and being decent towards the fans about that, who have been longing for football, who we can argue who's number one as far as the top fan base, but this is a top 3 fan base, and I don't think anyone would argue with me in the XFL and alt football in general. So I've been really impressed by that, and I really like his bringing in Donnie Abraham, a guy he played with, and an AAF guy, and Bruce Gadkowski as his coordinators as well. He's been very vocal about his LaFleur McVay scheme he'll be running. So that's something I like.
We have another guest joining here. We have Eric Eager. Eric was with us with the USFL draft as well. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself and how are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm Eric Eager. I work for Sumer Sports. I was previously at PFF. I'm really excited. I didn't realize this until I typed it out today. This is the 5th straight spring that we have some sort of football. And I think that this is lining up to be probably the best one.
Yeah, Eric, how are you? We talk and you come on the show and you're in all these, the more pro football and scouting, all that's for us in alt football in the XFL here. Should we be excited? How are you feeling? I view you a little bit more of an outsider looking in.
Yeah, exactly. I there are people who are getting a chance in this league. You guys just talked about Bruce Gadkowski. Bruce was my colleague at PFF. He graded our quarterbacks. And, he was a high school head coach, I think. And then he's finally getting a chance to work with Anthony Beck in St. Louis, getting a chance to call plays at the professional level for the first time. It's stuff like that obviously hooks you. It's the guys who have, kind of flamed out of the NFL, like AJ McCarron and Paxton Lynch. And it's versus the guys who are kind of, I would say, alt league lifers like Louis Perez and Jordan Ta'amu and even Brandon Silvers, who was on the previous version of the XFL. I've always liked these leagues. I've always felt like, we get, new life into the NFL every once in a while. Obviously, you had Kavonte Turpin, who was an all-pro in the NFL this year as a return man. We'll see. We had 65 starting quarterbacks in the NFL this year, and a lot of them struggled, and I think developmental leagues are great for that. So I like these developmental leagues in many ways for a lot of different reasons.
Pat's going to hop off here. Pat, anything else you want to say before we let you go? Get out of here.
I mean, I like what Eric's saying. I was very proactive in following the backup quarterbacks. It was the most we saw since the 80s. It was more than the COVID years as well. I think Eric, not to be that nerd, but it was 68 and they almost got to 50 wins. So you put the ball in 113 or 120 something times in the hands of your backup quarterback in the NFL this year. So with that being said, Reed, I need to go back to bed. What time I got off of work and time zones and everything like
You're
that.
all good.
Appreciate you having me on, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. We appreciate it. We'll get Eric's thoughts on this because we've all been talking for a while. Game today, Vipers coming in, taking on the Renegades, right? Thoughts on the matchup, thoughts on the coaching, thoughts on the players, anything you want to share about kind of the weekend slate here, the first 2 games?
Yeah, it's sort of weird. Is there a reason did Drew Plitt just beat out Kyle Sloter, or is Kyle Sloter injured? That was one that surprised me as far as who's going to be the starting quarterback for Arlington. they had brought in Sal Cannella at a tight end who really, I didn't think Sloter was as good in the USFL as, his accolades. Like he had more interceptions and touchdowns. He was injured a lot of the time, but I felt like that offense wasn't nearly as good as, the hype, for New Orleans in the USFL. But then he comes here, and I actually really liked Plitt at Ball State. I thought he, was a pretty solid player for kind of a group of five quarterback. I think it looks like when we look at the point spread in this game, it looks like Arlington is favored, by 3.5 or so. That thing opened right around 2.5. So you have seen a decent amount of money. Actually, both these games today, Houston and Arlington, the two home teams, were short of a field goal favorite. And you've seen money come in on both. Houston's already out to -4, which I kind of agree with. So yeah, there was just a couple of questions I had about that one because I was expecting to see Sloter, but it looks like we're going to see Plitt.
I have a question for Eric. Vince, anything else from you? I know you're going to hop off here, and we have another couple guests popping on here to fill out. Anything from you before you get out?
No, I mean, just really excited for this weekend. Really excited to see. I mean, more or less, I've just been following like the Ticketmaster map, looking to see how the sales are doing, and it's like, I mean, Arlington looks basically like there's maybe like 50 seats left you can get, and like even though Houston looks like there's still a handful left, it's still they got to have at least 18,000 coming out to the first game. It's looking like. And, I'm hoping that, these strong week one attendances just kind of maintain across. I think the XFL did a great job of picking their markets, keeping the strong markets from 2020 and then taking the AAF's two strongest markets from 2019 and, adding Vegas was a curveball, but they're playing in such a small stadium. They should be able to sell it out every single week. So I'm looking forward to this season. I'm glad that we're finally back.
Vince, it's been a long time. We appreciate it, sir. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Talk soon.
Eric, is someone, with fantasy and all of that, we've been having the depth chart sent out this week, and I know it's like kickoff weekend and we're busy, whatever, but trying to disseminate this information out to people. I'm trying to tweet it, but everyone's coming to me like, where are these posted? Where can we get these? Like, how can the XFL do a better job of getting people to bet, getting people to do fantasy on the league?
Well, I think that has to be it. They have to be better at their information, right? I mean, the reason that the injury reports exist for the NFL is, people don't realize this, but the reason the NFL injury reports exist is because of gambling, right? And because they want a place where, all that information is kept in a timely manner. Obviously, data is a big issue. I know that Genius Sports recently announced their deal with the XFL, and that was a problem in previous seasons. I know my former employer PFF, like they finished second in the bidding for the data for the XFL in 2020, and the provider then did such a poor job in the first 4 weeks of the season that PFF got it in week 5, and of course the league ended because of COVID in the middle of that season. So, I would just say, and again, this is big. I mean, this is, even when you look back at the old Arena League football, which I know is coming back in the next year, like they really leaned into DFS and gambling at the end. And I thought it was a little bit too late, but for these leagues to really have, the momentum, they really do have to lean into the gambling a little and fantasy. And because of that, they need to be more forthcoming with their information. It can't just be the person who's got all the time in the world to go fish through every single report that can get all the information for these leagues. Like, for example, like I just talked about Sloter. Like, I don't even know. Plitt's starting from what it looks like in all these depth charts I'm looking at online, but he very well could. It very well might be a situation where he doesn't, and it's because of like there's no way in the NFL that a quarterback would start. And on day of game, none of us knew that he was going to start. Like that's just not the case, and I think the XFL has to live up to that as well.
Yeah, when they, I think when they set that out, it was the first one. I think it was the Guardians, and it said Paxton Lynch or DeAndre Francois, or they had a couple of ors. I said, "What is this? The CFL? Like, what do we have going on here?" And then Andy was talking with the Michael Riley of it. Andy, anything to add to that? Like, again, I get like we're pressed for time. But this is something that people that would not even watch the XFL anyway, like, okay, I want to be tuned in here. I thought the USFL did a horrendous job with this last year.
Yeah, you have to be more transparent in that regard. I know there has to be an element of surprise, and maybe you can do that in terms of scheming, but in terms of having the depth charts ready, I mean, look, I was very much making that strategy last night when I was trying to draft players. So I went ahead, I jumped the gun, and I drafted Cole McDonald. Well, Cole McDonald is not starting tonight for the Houston Roughnecks. That's going to be Brandon Silvers. So my alternative strategy was, okay, well, I will then seek out a bunch of different offensive playmakers, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. And if Drew Plitt or Kyle Sloter are still on the board later on, I'll take one of those too. Now, I took Drew Plitt presumably thinking that he was going to be starting tonight, or today. And as we just talked about, well, there's a giant or next to those two names. So it still may even backfire in my face if I think that he's going to start today and holding McDonald for later on, presuming that he's going to start later. So it's just a lot of it is for me, it's a strategy, but for a lot of people, that's just too much uncertainty for them in terms of getting involved in fantasy aspects, in terms of really knowing what's going on. And for bettors, I mean, that's all the information they need. So yeah, that's something that has to be. We'll see if that gets ironed out, if that's more transparent down the road. Because I think the CFL, I know they had that controversy with Michael Connor and Nathan Rourke, but I think they cleaned that up afterwards because there was so much stir around that. Or maybe, I'm not sure if Randy Ambrosie came down and knocked on the door of the BC Lions and said, hey, knock it off.
Yeah, Eric, do alt leagues like the USFL and the XFL, do they make it too challenging to like want to do the fantasy and do the sports betting with them?
Probably. I know that, I think that there's just a bigger barrier to entry. And I think people need to, with gaming, people need to at least know that there's a chance. Right. And if you don't even know the players, and it's going to be hard to know the players anyway, like a lot of people, I was this way before I got into football professionally. It's like a lot of people are just NFL fans. So when we look at, things like, when we look at, Ben DiNucci, when we look at, Jack Cohn, like you might be a huge Notre Dame fan. And that's why you give a crap about Jack Cohn, or back in the AF, you were, the Birmingham Iron, like you cared about Trent Richardson. Right. But if you're not really like, if you're not really a fan of both college and pro, like this might not be the place for you unless the information is easily accessible. And so for me, I think you really do have to make it that way because, people will gamble. People will bet on sports. People will throw a few shekels on these games. But when it comes to like DFS, like I know in the USFL, like they really had a hard time, filling the contests because like who's going to know like the eighth, ball carrier in that weekend's game or something like that. Like it's just kind of tough. So I think that they do need to be more open. And part of that I think is also just because, when you have NFL, you have NFL comms people, you have NFL, situations where all the, it's the head coach's job is hard enough. We saw in the USFL last year, Kirby Wilson was a disaster. Jeff Fisher was who he was. And like, so and I'm, these staffs all the way on down, like they're just, they're alt league staffs, right? So it kind of, it's probably up to the leagues to make rules so that these, folks will follow them because they're not going to do it, I think, on their own free will.
It's interesting. You said last year USFL had a hard time, filling the whatever the quotas or whatever, because this is kind of outside of my wheelhouse. But I enjoy you guys because you have the knowledge of the players too. But have you noticed, does XFL have good interest in that? Does it feel like a hot thing right now coming in?
It has to be, right? I mean, I think this is where, the USFL probably, made a little. So I think the USFL made a good gamble by being an April to July league in that their players were in good enough shape to be in NFL training camps in August, right? That was the good thing that they did. I felt like that was an incredibly smart thing for them to do from that perspective. It got, a lot of people, Maurice Alexander with the Lions, obviously Turpin. You had Greg Odom was, playing for the Browns, probably would have made the team had he not gotten hurt. You had quarterbacks too. The issue, though, is that from a sports betting and fantasy perspective, like this is the perfect time to start an alt league because everybody comes off of the Super Bowl with all the money in their accounts. Everybody's sort of still kind of in that mindset. And if you're somebody like me who doesn't really like, I don't mind the NBA. I don't mind the NHL. I don't mind those things, but I'm not betting on them. I don't feel like I know that much enough about them to bet them. So, you might be able to, entice people to enjoy the league because they still have money in their accounts to bet. And if you wait 2 months like the USFL did last year, that kind of dries up a little bit. So I think, interestingly, these two leagues are kind of working in tandem from the gaming perspective, because you have people who are still interested in football who will bet on the XFL, play DFS on the XFL, and then they'll hopefully still have money in their accounts and stuff like that. And they'll still be kind of in the swing of things when they start playing 8 games a weekend starting in April.
I think it's just a really good, concise thing to bet on. Like I said, I can't do the fantasy in the NFL, and I've been invited to that. And I know Andy and them did the fantasy last night. I did the CFL, whatever it was. Like, it's just more tangible. I can't get my head around trying to bet on all these games. Like, I can do, four games a week or whatever. I think it's more, and I think it's a good, use it as an introductory to get people into other stuff. Like, hey, the stakes aren't as high. Eric, does that, and then we'll get Andy's thoughts. So, does that make sense? Like, almost use the XFL as an introductory platform to do that?
Yeah, I mean, and especially in these leagues, you get, I think, in these leagues, you get, it really stretches your brain out a little bit, right? So I know when the AAF started in the spring of 2019, all the totals were 51, right? And the first week, if you just blindly bet under, you win 3. I mean, I think every single week of the AAF, except for one, if you blindly bet under on every single game, you went 3-1 every single weekend. But those totals kept declining, and then you have to sharpen up. And then now, the AAF was basically the same exact rules as the NFL, except for there were no extra points and no kickoffs. But now you have, the end of half kind of situations where, the clock stops and you think an under is a lock because in the first quarter and second quarter until the 2-minute warning, everything keeps the clock moving, right? So these totals are 36.5 in this first game, 35.5 in the second game. But then at the end of halves, they really do help these quarterbacks out by stopping the clock at almost every turn. And so it makes you think about strategy a little bit different as a bettor, right? Do I bet under, or, if I'm betting live or something like that, do I bet over because maybe the books don't have the right simulations in place, and so you can get a really good price on the the over once it enters 2 minutes, because those 2 minutes are going to be longer than they are in the NFL. It's a really good introduction, and not even to mention the 1-point conversion, the 2-point conversion, and the 3-point conversion. All of those probabilities in the mix as well. What's a 1-score game now is actually different than a normal.
We'll toss it to Andy here, and then we have another guest coming on. And Eric, I guess it's up to you if you want to hop off and go do other important stuff. I appreciate you coming on today. Andy, any thoughts on that? We'll toss to Eric, and then we'll get Matt on here.
Tons, actually. But to sort of bounce off just a couple of points that Eric has made. It's interesting. I've been monitoring the over-unders and spreads throughout the week on all the games. And unlike the AAF, all of these over-unders are quite low. For today's game, for example, the over-under on the books I've been looking at is 37. Then the Roughnecks game is 35. The Battlehawks game is 36.5. And then the DC Defenders game is 35.5. So they're really, really low totals. And I think the fact that they're all kind of uniform just shows that there's not a lot of certainty in terms of where the teams are in terms of scoring proficiency, how they utilize their players, what's the level of play going to be on the first weekend. That's all sort of unknown. I've talked to people who've expressed to me how uncertain they are about point spreads because of all the different point conversion attempts in this day and age of analytics. Who knows how aggressive people are going to be in terms of going for 2, going for 3. As you mentioned before, it's so interesting now when I watch an NFL game and it's a 9-point spread, and I'm thinking in the XFL, this is a 1-score game. And that's why people debated with the Chiefs last week when they went up by 7. And some people said, hey, maybe they should go for 2 because then they're up by 9 and it's a 2-score game. Well, they ultimately didn't. They went for 1, and then the Eagles came back down the field and tied it and got on the 2-point conversion. So those are all, mitigating factors, and they're kind of new elements for people to consider now when it comes to betting, as Eric mentioned. And I think there's just kind of a lot of feeling out. I'm not sure how aggressive people are going to be the first week, but I think there's just a lot of unknown kind of going into this first week.
Last thoughts for Eric, and then we'll bring Matt on. Eric, we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, of course, this is fun. I love, I love football a lot, and I think it's cool that we get to watch in the spring. And I hope, like last year, we get both leagues to finish the season, because it really was fun. I mean, you think about how great the championship game in the USFL was with Birmingham versus Philadelphia, how many times that score flipped in the fourth quarter. And I think football is such a great game, and we deserve to have it in the spring. So I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I really hope you guys enjoy the games, and may your bets hit.
There we go.
Take care,
Eric,
everybody.
thank you so much. We appreciate it. We're going to get rid of Eric. We're going to bring on Matt Lyons here, covering the our Seattle Sea Dragons here, Andy's cohort over at the XFL News Hub. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself, say hi. I'm going to go fill my water and be back. So why don't Matt say hi, and then let's talk about what we're excited for today. I'll be right back.
Sounds good. Hey guys, I'm Matt Lyons, writer for XFL News Hub, covering the Seattle Dragons, Sea Dragons now. And I mean, holy crap, we've been waiting 3 years for this weekend, and it still doesn't really feel real. I'm like, I don't know if it'll feel real till we actually get to kickoff in a little while. But man, just can't believe we're here. How things been going on the show so far, Andy? I tuned in a couple minutes ago.
It's been good. We've had a good number of guests. I have to say, I know you're very battle tested, not only for how long we've waited for this league, but also the fact that you had to go through 4 different rounds of fantasy football drafting last night. So thank you for bearing with that.
Yeah, no, thank you for setting it up. I feel like part of that was my fault for messing up the league so many times. I had the first pick like 3 times, and it just kept going randomly. But no, I'm glad we got that. The fantasy should be fun. I think it ended up really well, and I like the people we have in that league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we'll see if I'll see if the Drew Plitt gamble ends up paying off today. If it does end up actually starting and going in there for the Renegades, and then see if the Cole, as I mentioned on the show earlier today, the Cole McDonald's project, seeing if that pays off as well. So there's a lot going on here. But how's preparation been for you as far as today, and also for the Sea Dragons, obviously, who are going to be playing tomorrow?
It's been great. Today is nice because I just kind of get to enjoy the games as a fan. So that's nice. If it wasn't 10:15, 10:20 in the morning, I might break out the Terramana, but but no, not yet. No, I'm super looking forward to the games. I think we got some great matchups. I think the Renegades and Vipers is going to be a fun game to kick off the weekend. And then in terms of getting ready for the Sea Dragons and stuff, I might be a little biased, but I'm thinking that might be one of the better matchups of the weekend. I think we've got those are 2 of the more talented teams in the league, and to close out the opening weekend, I think that's a great way to do it.
I want to get talks on the Sea Dragons here. If you look behind me, you can see we got quite a line building around. So we're at the corner of, I think it's the first base. So that would be center field, right? That door there. You can see quite the line building out there. Why? I saw Mike, I think, tweeted, or the News Hub, I can't remember if it was Mark tweeted, everyone did their picks, all you writers, whatever today. Why are people so high on the Sea Dragons? I mean, it's good for me. I'm excited, but Andy, am I missing something?
Well, I guess I'm missing something too, but in my reevaluation of the team, I understand obviously the June Jones element of it, obviously with all of the offense and all of the potential playmaking on that team. I think it's a good quarterback room. I think there's good abilities to really utilize some of the skill position players on there. There's even guys that I know, like from college, like Jalen Redd, I know is one of the receivers. He was kind of like a receiver running back hybrid. I know he's lower on the depth chart, but he's a guy that I really like as well. But I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's their ability to potentially, I guess the word I would use is to put up buckets. If I'm going to use an NBA term, because I think they have a chance to really be able to score a lot of points and to score ad nauseum. And I think that's really the only game tomorrow with the Defenders and the Sea Dragons where a lot of people I noticed are taking the over, which, by the way, I was saying to Eric earlier, the over-under is really low on a lot of these games. But for that game, a lot of people seem to think that there's going to be a lot of points in that game. So I think that's part of it. If you can score, I mean, obviously, if you can score, you can win. But like if you can score a lot, that's a huge thing that kind of gives you an edge over a lot of these teams. That was the case with June Jones and the Roughnecks back in 2020. They were just able to outscore you. It didn't matter how their defense played. As long as they got a turnover or 2 and they gave the ball back to their offense, they most likely were going to have the upper hand.
Matt, you have an admirer here, right? Chauncey says, "Who's that redhead? He's cute." Maybe Matt has one. What is calling that?
Oh, that's
good.
my buddy Ryan. What's up, Chauncey?
You're gonna make Matt even more red. Yeah, is it the June firepower? Is it the Danucci of it? Is him being more of a known? I mean, I would be curious. I think Vegas had the Dragons as number 2. They have the Battlehawks really high, which is weird to me because we've seen more, with their quarterback room and Ryan Willis and stuff leaving. It's weird to me that people are so high on the Dragons, but I think we deserve that after going 1-4 back in 2020.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of a couple things. You have an experienced coaching staff who's been in leagues like this before. And June Jones, as you mentioned, is the offensive coordinator for the Sea Dragons. And he was the head coach of the Houston Roughnecks in 2020, who went undefeated through 5 weeks. And the the director of player personnel is Randy Mueller, who was also the director of player personnel with June Jones in Houston. So they already have some synergy going there. And then Randy Mueller was it in the early 2000s? He won NFL Executive of the Year. So it's not like he's foreign to football. Head coach Jim Haslett was NFL Coach of the Year for the Saints in early 2000s, and he runs a pretty good defense from what I've heard. And then you just have a bunch of experienced NFL players, and on top of that, really talented young players who don't have a ton of NFL experience. As you mentioned, Ben DiNucci, who's played a bit for the Cowboys, and behind him, Steven Montez, who personally I think might be the more physically gifted athlete, but mentally he had some stuff to work on from film. I've seen DiNucci is definitely the more polished guy. But then the big name, Josh Gordon, which a lot of people are kind of not too high on just because of how things have gone with him in the past. But people seem to forget the issue with Josh Gordon was never his talent. It was the fact that he really liked weed. And so, I mean, from all accounts, from what I've seen in camp, from what I've heard from people in camp and stuff, it seems like he's still got something left in the tank. I'm excited to see what he's got. The team definitely has been showing him off, which, would be to be expected with him being one of the more high-profile players in the whole league. Other people I like are Ja'Cour Pearson, who's another former NFL wide receiver. Tight end Charlie, I'm going to butcher this last name, Tomo Pio, something like that. Another good receiver. And then the O-line is just pretty solid across the board, which is not super common in leagues like this. Offensive line's usually the hardest thing to come by, and I'm sure they're not going to be perfect, but in terms of measuring them up with a lot of the other teams in the league, they seem to be. I think they'll be able to hold their own. This last week signed one of the top, or I don't know if he was top, but a CFL veteran offensive lineman, which will definitely help. A lot of people don't think too highly of the CFL in America, but as someone who's covered them for a year, I didn't this last year, but I would personally say out of all of the alternative leagues, the CFL probably has the best talent out of all of them. So the fact that we're getting players from the CFL in these leagues is awesome. Then on the defensive side of the ball, anchoring your defense, you got Jordan Evans and Trey Walker, who are two guys also with NFL experience, and then got some defensive backs with NFL experience and defensive line. Everybody's got NFL experience on the defense, honestly. So, I think it's a great squad.
Well, I'm just excited here. We're going to bring on our next guest. I'm just excited to see undefeated head coach Jim Haslett bring his Houston Roughnecks to 6-0 at the beginning of the season. If you know, you know. In my Jim Ross voice, by God, that's Mike Mitchell's music. That's Mike Mitchell's music. Mike, the GOAT, XFL Insider here, XFL Kickoff Day. How the heck are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Reed. Thanks for having me on. I've been checking out your show while I can with all this crazy family business I got going on in the background. So, Andy, Matt, good to see you guys. And this is very exciting. You know, first and foremost, the first thing I'd like to say is you have to send out a level of gratitude towards Redbird Capital Partners, Jerry Cardinal, Dwayne Johnson, and Danny Garcia for taking this risk, right? So none of this is possible today without them actually taking this risk, because make no mistake, this is a risk. All these leagues are. I don't think people realize how hard it is to run a pro sports league. I don't think people realize how expensive it is. So that's not to say that this group, this new ownership, hasn't been without its faults. I've certainly been critical along the way. There are a couple of things that are probably sticking in my craw still at this very moment. But the fact that they've put their resources and money and time to make this a reality is awesome. We're talking about they have over 800 employees, over 400 players are going to get an opportunity to play pro football on ABC, ESPN, tremendous exposure. All the coaches, the football personnel, people benefit from this league, as well as the media. Right? All of us, the football writers I cover 4 different leagues, who cover these leagues. And this is big, burgeoning media, established media. These leagues, we know one of our colleagues there, Jay Noakes, is part of the XFL now. He's living his dream. So it extends beyond the dreams that are being realized today, extend beyond just the players, the coaches, football personnel, and all that. You got people in the medium who are actually getting an opportunity to live out their dreams, something they've wanted their whole lives. And without Danny Garcia, Jerry Cardinal, the big bucks there, Redbird Capital, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, none of this is possible. So it's really awesome to see. It's going to be exciting. It's surreal. It doesn't feel real. I had a dream the other night. Never a good thing when you have a dream that involves social media. But I had a dream that I went on social media and I read that the week 1 of the XFL was canceled. And so it's been like one of those, and it seemed kind of real. I guess maybe it's a history with trauma. We're going back 3 years ago, week 5, that came up in my dream. But the fact that we're here, we've gone through a long road to get here, and we've been very patient, and we're excited about it. We're all football fans. So this is just tremendous today. All the dreams that are being realized today, it's a beautiful day for football.
So we're filling in here. We're going to bring on, and Greg, I see you here as well. My screen is too. We have so many guests lined up to come on the show. I couldn't even see all the guests here. We have Evan Willsmore coming on. Evan with the XFL News Hub. Evan, how are you doing? And then we're going to bring in one more, and then we have a special call-in guest. But let's give Evan just a quick chance to say hello.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Reed. Just got to Houston, settled in, got my hotel room. So going to hang out here for a couple hours, watch the Vegas Arlington game, and then down to the stadium to, take care of business.
Evan's going to be covering the Houston Roughnecks down there today. Exciting game. I think the sleeper hit. I think let's hope Guardians Roughnecks is the by and away the favorite of the weekend. And then speaking of the Guardians here, we have with XFL board, we have Greg Parks here. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Reed. Thanks for having me on here.
Happy XFL Kickoff Day. How are you feeling?
Little tense, a little nervous. I think we're all very excited, but very nervous because we know how important today is in terms of trying to get the most eyeballs on the product to sort of springboard this league into the success that I think we all believe it deserves. And so we all wanted to get off on the right foot. No hitches in the giddy up anywhere today. Hopefully some exciting games, and then we're on to week 2 and beyond.
So we'll get everyone a chance to talk here. I don't think you'll besmirch me for going to my wife here for a quick minute. We have a special live in. Let's see if this works. Dorothy's down at the stadium here. We're going to see if she can do a call here. Dorothy, how are things looking down at Choctaw?
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
We can. How are you doing?
Oh. Good. It's good. It's busy. Yeah. Well, not too many people. I saw a couple Renegades people walking around, but yeah, it's good. It's a little windy, but it's good.
How's the temp? Are you cold out there?
I'm a little chilly right now, but I got to get my coat on here. Then I think I'll be good. So yeah, it's been good. I was walking around. I got a mimosa. I guess they're doing some big, like charity bingo thing. So all these women are wearing like Kentucky Derby hats, and yeah, it's busy.
Are you getting lots of compliments on your Sea Dragons or on your not Sea? Now I'm doing it the other way on your Dragons jersey.
Yeah, one guy was wondering what that was, so I was trying to explain it to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's that." But then he told us to go check out the Jerry Jones. What's he called it? Jerry Jones Kingdom or something. So yeah, we walked by Cowboy Stadium already. So yeah.
Andy, do you have any questions for Dorothy? We'll just keep her on here for a second.
Yeah. So you mentioned it's windy. How windy is it? Is it like a little breeze, or is it kind of something that would alter like a field goal?
It's pretty windy.
Okay.
Pretty windy.
As long as it's not hurricane force winds.
No, not hurricanes. Not hurricanes. Just enough for my hair to get stuck in my lip gloss. You know how fun that is.
What do you make of the area we've been at, Texas Live, lots of stuff to eat and drink at. Know where the podcast live from, but lots of places to eat and drink around there. What do you make of the area around Choctaw?
Yeah, I think it'd be really awesome, especially in the spring and summer. They got all these outdoor areas, and you can pretty much just bar hop around. And I think they have live music too during the summer. So yeah, and then it was cool. I went into Dallas last night, the Deep Ellum, and I looked up that bar we went to. I guess it was owned by the Reed brothers back in 1895. It was an old meat packing. It was an old meat packing place. So yeah.
I hear drums down there. People play music.
Yeah, there's like some marching band type people here. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, exciting. Well, we have a live in-person report. Dorothy, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll see you up here. We're going to head to the stadium soon.
Okay, see ya. Good luck.
Let's go to Evan and then Greg. Evan, thoughts on today? 3 years coming. I think you said last night, getting emotional talking about all this. What do you make of everything?
Yeah, man. Well, it's one of those things where, and I think we can all agree, we didn't know it was going to be back, right? 3 years ago, COVID shut down the league, and that was the second time that the league had been around. There was in 2001, that only lasted a year, obviously, and then 2020 got cut short. And after that, it kind of looked bleak. And, even when I joined all of you guys at XFL News Hub, I was saying, like in the middle of 2021, when I started writing, there was a lot of talks at the time, but not a lot of movement. At the time they were focused on a partnership with the CFL as opposed to, putting a rushed hard product together, which I think ultimately was the right decision. They took their time, and it seems to be well worth the wait. Again, we'll find out today. But yeah, it's a lot of feelings. It really hit me this morning. I barely got any sleep. So I'm definitely going to sleep well tonight after the game. But yeah, I think it'll hit me even more once I'm down, like at the stadium, on the field, looking around, talking to people. Just really, really excited for this.
Greg, I think you can always do a good job of contextualizing everything. Where are we at today in your life?
The XFL, the first time around in 2001, I was a huge wrestling fan. And so I was also a huge football fan. So it was natural to me to be attracted to Vince McMahon creating this football league that was going to be crazier, wilder, more extreme than the NFL. And so you watched it, and I enjoyed it, but a lot of people didn't, unfortunately. And so I was still in high school at the time. I was someone who always enjoyed writing, and so that's kind of where I got my foot in the door. There was an email back in the day before blogs and everything like that. You would do like email newsletters, and I got hooked up covering the league for some email, just randomly, like some email newsletter that went out to a bunch of people. And I had a couple columns in that. So like even back in 2001, I was still interested in the writing aspect of it and covering it. And then, 2020 comes around, and I got to thank Mike Mitchell for getting me in at XFL board and getting me in contact with Mark Nelson. And I've been writing about, the XFL now pretty consistently since, I think, 2019-ish. And then, to see it, it was hard in 2001 to see it disappear, although you could understand why, right? The ratings went down. It was a product nobody really wanted to be associated with. And then 2020, they did everything right, and it still didn't survive. And this time it was something completely out of their control that took it down. So that was frustrating on a whole different level. And now here we are in 2023, where you're just crossing your fingers this time and hoping that everything lines up the right way. Having been burned twice by this league, the entire buildup, you're looking to pick holes in what the ownership is doing. And Lord knows we've done that here on this podcast. We've done it in written form. We've done it on social media, right? We've questioned the decision-making. But ultimately, here we are. It's game day. Let's see if all those decisions and the wait was worth it.
Yeah, Mike, is the wait going to be worth it?
I think so. It absolutely is. Technically, I heard Greg on your show a little while back. He said I think he said this is the longest running iteration of the XFL. So thereabouts. When you think about it, technically the XFL is 23 years old now. Thereabouts. If you consider from inception to this point. It's just fascinating to me, like that we've reached this point. And for someone like myself and Greg, we go back to the very early internet days and message boards, and shout out to XFL board, Mark Nelson, all those guys, everybody who's working there. Greg is a tremendous writer, does a tremendous job covering this league. He's got a teacher background, so I love the fact that he does his homework. Not shocking. So anyhow, but this is fun for all of us, and it's great for the league, and I'm glad it's made it to this point. Get no guarantees that it's going to last. So hopefully it does this go around. I think the concept is a strong one. I think it should survive. I think the football landscape needs it. And so there's definitely certain things maybe about the XFL that I could nitpick. Dorothy was talking about seeing a few people out there with jerseys, and I guess they're the 2020 versions, So I don't, there are a couple of missteps along the way here. Like you would think the jerseys would be for sale. At this point, you'd want to monetize that. And then there are a couple of other things, like in terms of fantasy and gambling, that maybe the league didn't hit upon, the promotional wise. You can argue bare bones budget, understaffed, overworked staff, that kind of thing. But there's some missteps along the way here that they haven't really capitalized on. But I think the concept is so strong that it can override any of these hiccups that you see from a new pro football league. Because even though this is the third iteration, this is really a new ownership, a new group. Name may still be the same, but, they got to prove themselves. I think, I spoke with someone a little bit earlier today that been a part of the AAF, the XFL in 2020, and the USFL. And he thinks, now this is his opinion, that this is the best talent he's ever had in any of these leagues. And he's currently with one of the teams right now. And so that's pretty impressive in and of itself. And so proof's going to be in the pudding. We're going to see some issues early on because these teams got their preseason games wiped out because of the crazy Texas weather. That would have helped a little bit. I know they've been together for a while, 5 weeks or whatever it is now. And so the play will improve as the season goes along because these teams don't have established identities yet. So, we're going to have to, I remember XFL in 2020, right? If you look back on it, only 2 quarterbacks survived by the time we got to week 5. It's Jordan Te'amu and PJ Walker, of course. And so the rest of the guys that started in week 1, I know some of that had to do with injury. I know some of that had to do with performance, but the Matt McGloins, Aaron Murray's, the big week 1 starters. I know a couple of those guys, Philip Nelson, Charles Canoff. All these guys, they didn't really. Brandon Silvers, who rides again, this time with the Roughnecks. It didn't. By the time we got to week 5, a lot of these guys, were taking a seat to Daniels and his other quarterbacks. Luis Perez, who lives on forever. He's eternal in spring pro football. So, so there's so many cool storylines and fun aspects about this opening week, and the fact that it's a reality is really awesome.
We're going to toss to Matt. Matt's going to hop out. We have one more guest joining us here before we ride you here to 1 o'clock, and then we'll get ready for the Player 54 re-airing, and I got to get ready for the stadium here. Matt, any other final thoughts from you?
Not a ton from me. Just thanks for having me on, and hope everybody enjoys the game. It's been a long time coming, so definitely make sure we take it in.
It's going to be good. Yeah, Matt's covering the Sea Dragons over. They got the big game tomorrow. I like having the poetry of the Defenders Dragons game kind of bookend the weekend as it did back in 2020. So Matt, thank you so much. We'll get you off here, and then we're going to bring on our last guest, who will be joining me next Friday as well for the show as I record. We're going to Mexico next week, so Andy will be with me on Tuesday. We're going to do a special week 1 recap. And then John's going to be with me on Friday. We'll figure out timing with that. John Vogel, how are you doing, sir?
Great, guys. And thanks for having me again. I'm excited. I just got all my bets put in about 20 minutes ago. So I'm ready to rock and roll on FanDuel. Having fun. Get ready. Let's go.
Well, so who are you taking today? We have Vipers and Renegades, and then obviously Guardians at Roughnecks, Battlehawks. I'm excited for that tomorrow with the Brahmas and then the Sea Dragons with the Defenders.
Yeah, I'm honestly going to go with the over on the first between the Vipers and Arlington. I think that the over was set at 35.5. That sounded like something I liked as a potential. I think you've got it that is okay, DraftKings, yeah. So I was going off of FanDuel. I believe it was at 35.5. I believe both games are at 35, 36.5, that range. And then I'm going to go with the under on Orlando because I just don't know what the Orlando offense is going to show. And I think that's probably going to be like a 20-6 type game. So I like the under there, but I like Vegas and Arlington both putting up 20 today, it being a relatively close game. I'm going to go with Arlington getting the win here by 3.5. So I like that spread. And then I think I pretty much just tipped. I think Houston's going to win the second game by 3, well, beyond 3.5. I'd be willing to take double digits there, honestly.
Evan, what do you make of that? Then we'll get Greg and Mike's thoughts. Thoughts on the game, or do you feel confident in the Silver Fox here? Brandon Silver is going tonight, tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it in my preview that I did recently a couple days ago. I think this is sort of a game where you want to test out a lot because next week Arlington comes to town and they have one of the stronger rosters in the league, I believe. So I think this game, we should win either way, but I wouldn't feel a ton of pressure if people don't perform. Well, I guess my point is this shouldn't be maybe the expectation. Like if the game ends up being, like I think I put in the article too, like a low scoring slugfest, because on FanDuel, the over under for points was the lowest of week 1 projected totals. Even if it ends up turning out like that, I think, Houston still has an advantage. And, again, they maybe don't have the strongest roster in the league, but this is a real test, I think, of, how the coaching staff is coming back. AJ setting up the offense. You've got Wade Phillips kind of establishing himself as, one of the premier coaches in this league and a Houston legend also. So there's a lot on the line, but not a lot on the line for this one at the same time. It's an interesting matchup.
Greg, thoughts on that? 35 here, over under 35, 36, more in there. AJ Smith tonight, we had him on the show, high offense. Are you surprised with any of that, or who are you looking for the upset today?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised. I think we've seen that defenses tend to have the advantage early on in the season, especially when it's just everything is new, right? All the teams are new, the offenses are new, and things like that. So not surprised at the over-under there. Certainly you look at the potential of the offense in Houston. And I think one of the interesting things is, Mike brought up the point that in 2020, there was so much quarterback turnover between weeks 1 through 5, whether it was injury or performance. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen again this year, simply because so many teams are very deep at quarterback. I mean, you look at the Houston team, they're starting Brandon Silvers, which I think surprised a lot of people. They've got Cole McDonald as their backup, who I think a lot of people thought was going to start. And then you have other teams like Arlington with Drew Plitt starting over Kyle Sloter, who performed so well in the USFL last year. And there are a couple teams that have a pretty good 1-2 punch at quarterback, Vegas with Luis Perez and Brett Hundley. So, it wouldn't surprise me if that happened again here within the first few weeks.
Mike, thoughts on that? And then we'll toss to Andy and then get Evan involved.
Orlando game is interesting to me because on paper, it looks like it's going to be the blowout this week. And I could be completely wrong. A lot of experts have been down on the Guardians. Well, I like their receiving core. I think Charleston Rambo is going to be a star. You're going to see him in the NFL. There's some aspects of that team that intrigue me. But when you look at it on paper, Wade Phillips, the experience he has there with Brian Stewart, that defense at home, AJ Smith, you'd figure that game would be like a 26-10, 26-9. We might get some odd scores because of conversions and all that. And the Vipers-Renegades game is fascinating, too, from an experience standpoint. I think the Vipers kind of lean towards the Joey Clinkscale, guy who was part of a front office that drafted Nick Mangold, Darrell Rivas, et cetera, et cetera. He was with the Jets from 94 to 2012. He's got a lot of experience in this space, and they got experience at quarterback with Hundley and Perez, and they have a little bit of a slant towards NFL veteran types. Obviously Martavis Bryant, Jeff Badette, Rod Smith. They got a lot of different Beasley. There's a lot of different guys who have NFL experience there. So I think that's a tough matchup for Arlington, even though I think the Renegades are the favorites in the league because of that coaching staff, the front office, the combination of the assistants they have. They're probably the best coaching staff overall in the league. So with Tim Lewis, everybody else there. So I think the Saturday games are fascinating. And the odds makers have them as low scoring. I can understand based on the history of these leagues. And so we'll see which offenses are ready to go out the gate and I think it's going to be fun to watch. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression, so you're going to have people out there who are casuals that maybe crap on a bad turnover or some bad play and all that. Those of us who follow these leagues full well know that it takes time for these. For what you have is essentially 8 expansion teams playing together for the first time. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the product shakes out on the field and how these teams match up.
Evan, thing you're most excited to see from either the early game or the late game today?
I mean, it's difficult because I think the more intriguing matchup that's more unpredictable is Arlington and Vegas, because those are two of the more, again, unique rosters in the entire league. So I'm really excited. We're only a bit over an hour away from kickoff, which is insane. So I'm really interested to see that. But then considering I'm going to actually be on the sideline and in the press box at the Roughnecks game, I'm really just interested to see, I guess, the flow. And I mean that in sort of all aspects of the game, and not just for Houston, but also Orlando, because it's been a very long time, since, it's been 3 years since the XFL played. And for some of these guys, it's been a long time since they've played a proper game. And as Mike touched on, this is essentially 8 expansion teams playing for the first time. There's a lot of, unpredictability. This is really the first, I guess, gasp that we get, because we didn't have a preseason or things like that were supposed to happen in Arlington. So yeah, again, it's this seems to me like, again, it's a very important day. The opening day is always, I think, the most exciting. But at the same time, like I said earlier, it's also kind of a trial run. You want to see, how people react to it. Again, sort of establishing a flow, a system. So I think that's what I'm really looking forward to the most, because I do believe that the dynamic will be different from the NFL.
Andy, are we concerned? I'll get John's thoughts. Andy, that they didn't do the practice games, the ESPN, the trials, the great Texas ice storm of 2023 kind of threw a wrench in that?
Yeah, it would have been nice to have sort of an overview of what exactly we're going to expect. And also just in terms of, I guess, getting more reps for the players too, just be able to see them get more cohesion, which is now ultimately probably going to be more ironed out a few weeks into the season as opposed to before the season. But I think I mentioned that earlier in the show. Like, I think that ultimately was going to be the case anyways, because it's, as Greg mentioned, it's all new people. It's all new faces. It's all new chemistry for all these players, all these coaches, all the staffs, everything. There's no like holdover from the previous season like there is in the NFL or any other sports league, the CFL and all those. So there's obviously that kind of level of cohesion that's going to take time to build regardless. But I think that it's going to be really interesting. The offenses I'm really looking forward to seeing are probably the Roughnecks tonight, just to seeing how AJ Smith gets that scheme going. The Sea Dragons tomorrow in DC, and seeing how they kind of come out of the gate with June Jones. And I guess the other one I'm sort of curious about is maybe San Antonio, just seeing how the Jack Cohn experiment works. I am not the biggest proponent of Mr. Cohn. I've watched enough Wisconsin quarterbacks in my life, and I can tell you, aside from Russell Wilson, they're all the same to me. But but you've seen one, you've seen them all. But we'll see if he comes out. And he comes out and he plays very well, then obviously that's great for them. And in a raucous stadium, obviously the San Antonio Alamodome is going to be like basically full for their capacity. They have like 30,000 people. So, but yeah, just offensive cohesion, as some of you mentioned again, is going to be something that a lot of people, first-time viewers, are going to stick to and say, okay, these teams, it looks like these teams know what they're doing. It doesn't look like anyone knows what they're doing. That's going to be the first impression for everybody.
John, you were with me. We did the XFL draft and the supplemental draft and the quarterbacks and all that. We've gone through the cuts, everything. Who squad you're most excited to see and kind of the pieces involved in that?
Andy nailed it with DC, because we talked a lot about DC and the speed that they have. And then adding a guy like Abram Smith, who's really not speed but power. So you have a good blend of elements there, and I think that's going to be a fun team to watch tomorrow. You mentioned against San Antonio. Again, that's another team that I'm really interested in. And Jack Cohn, just to kind of point at it a little bit, he played his last year at Notre Dame, and I liked a lot of the stuff that he did at Notre Dame. I had a decent draft grade on him coming out from the NFL standpoint. I was really surprised he didn't latch onto a roster. So I'm interested to see how he looks. I think that if you're playing at Notre Dame, playing the competition that they do, this might be a step down for Cone a little bit, just because you're playing against USC, you're playing against, Clemson, and you're these teams that are just stacked with NFL players across the board. And I don't think I'm wondering if that helps Cone out in sense of the game is slowed down a little bit for him. So that's the other thing too, is how fast is this tempo going to be in this league? How fast is the game going to be for everyone else? We've got guys. Seattle's going to be fun. Randy's done a great job putting that roster together. So I guess those are the three I'm most excited to see. And then today, I think it's more of a I'm wondering how bad Orlando. Like you mentioned, Mike did a good job. Mike did a really good job talking about the receivers and the strengths of that team. But you can have great receivers. You have to have a quarterback to get them the ball. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of the big question mark with Orlando at this point is that quarterback enough? They're going to rotate all three is what it looks like according to the depth chart. I would expect them to rotate all three and just try them out and see what happens. But how bad is Orlando going to be? I think that's kind of my question with them.
We'll toss to Greg here. We had a question earlier, head coach you're most looking forward to seeing this year. By proxy of that, you can talk about the squads as well. So which coach are you most excited to see what they do this year and the squad they have?
Well, I think just seeing how the four most inexperienced coaches gel with the four veteran coaches, it was a pretty even split in the hiring process of, getting the veterans who've been there, who've done that, and then getting, brand new head coaches, first time head coaches at any level and bringing them in. So I think it's more of just seeing how the process works for those coaches and which one of those four real new head coaches stands out amongst the rest in terms of clock management, in terms of, decision to use timeouts, in terms of all the stuff that we Monday morning quarterback every week in the NFL about, head coaches' decisions to go for it on fourth down, decisions to go for field goals. Now we add in the decision of what tiered extra point to go for. So there's even more of a decision-making process to be criticized for these XFL coaches. So how are the Terrell Buckleys going to handle that? How are the Anthony Becks going to handle that? Guys who've never really been in that position before to be a head coach and have to deal with everything you deal with on game day, from first quarter to fourth quarter. I think that's more so than any one specific coach. That's really what I'm looking at. And then how the veteran coaches adapt to the XFL rules. They're veteran coaches, but this is a whole new environment for them, just as it is for the four new head coaches. So in that way, it sort of puts them all on even footing in terms of just the new rules and getting acclimated to that. So it's going to be fun to see it from that perspective and how the head coaches perform when you split them into those two groups.
We'll toss to Evan here, Mike, and then we'll get out. We have people, Player 54 starting here at 1. Spoiler, if you missed the first couple of minutes, they talk about Danny the Rock, and then we get into the player stuff here. But we'll give Evan and Mike, we'll get everyone one shot. We'll get out of here. Evan, coach, you're in with the Roughnecks, and obviously we're excited. For Wade Phillips and AJ, everybody there. Is that your coach you're most excited to see? And what about the squad you're excited to see?
Yeah, I definitely would say Wade. And I don't know, some people might say, oh, well, Wade's been coaching forever. Why wouldn't you pick one of the guys that's doing it for the first time, like an Anthony Beck or a Hines Ward? But I think for Wade, and I was telling people this, for this is very meaningful for him in the sense he gets to come back to Houston and be the head coach of a professional franchise. His entire kind of family tree extends around the Houston area, and he's spoken about that before. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity for him. And I know he'll do a great job. I just wonder if this is kind of the last dance for him, because he's 75 years old. He's not getting any younger. And that's not a slight against him. Obviously, he's one of the most talented defensive coaches of all time and has more football knowledge than any of us on this stream will ever have. But I think, I'm interested to see how, he incorporates that amount of NFL experience, when he's working with guys who maybe don't have an NFL pedigree, because he's coached, I think, something like 30 defensive Pro Bowlers and 5 defensive player of the years, back when he was working with JJ Watt. But now you're looking at guys who, again, well, we just talked about Player 54, guys that weren't really able to make an NFL roster for one reason or another. So it's kind of a different dynamic. And, I'm interested to see, with what level of intensity he approaches that with.
Yeah. I said, wait. I did see that him throwing the shade at the USFL. I'm like, I wouldn't want to go coach there or whatever it was. Mike, thoughts from you? We'll toss to Andy. We'll get out of here. Appreciate everyone's comments today.
Yeah, we're talking about the coaches. The guy I'm most fascinated with is Reggie Barlow. I think that might be the most exciting game of the weekend, the Defenders and the Dragons. I think that those two might be two of the better teams in the league. Barlow fascinates me because you do have Wade Phillips, who has a winning record in the NFL as a head coach. His defensive coordinator resume goes without saying. Then you've got Bob Stoops, winning record at Oklahoma. And then, of course, Jim Haslett, NFL Coach of the Year, coach for a long time, has won in even alt leagues, was undefeated for a season there before they lost the championship. But anyway, the thing I like about Barlow, who's got a winning record, albeit on the FCS level, but he was voted Coach of the Year there. And I think, John touched on it briefly, I believe. The majority of the XFL players have NFL experience. I think it's like 80% of them. So a lot of them are college all-stars. So these are players, also over 24 players or more, I think, were on NFL rosters this year. I think 24 were on NFL practice squads this year. So you got a lot of talent within this league. But Barlow is someone who didn't have the benefit of 5-star recruits and all that and made it work at his level. So he's going into position in the XFL where he's getting an opportunity to coach talent that's better than the college level, because I don't care what NFL team you take. I don't care what pro team you align. You match them up against any college team, they'd kill them. That old argument of like the best college team can beat the worst NFL team. Not true. Alabama, as great as they are, Georgia, as great as they are, small percentage of their players from their championship teams make it into the NFL. You get maybe 8, 12, 15. So you're not going to get, they have 70, 80, 90 players. All those 5-star recruits, 4-star recruits, all that, they don't make it into the NFL, believe it or not. It's just the way it goes. Only 1.6% of all college football players make the National Football League. So I think Reggie Barlow is positioned to be able to coach these players. I like his hires. I like the roster that Von Hutchins has put together. I like the fact that he has Greg Williams with him. Say what you want about him, but he's got a lot of experience as defensive coordinator. I think that Sunday night matchup, his aggressive style of defense against June Jones' offense should be fun. So there are a lot of interesting elements to the league, and I like the variety with the coaches where you have a lot of new guys who are going up against, these experienced hands that I just mentioned. So it should be fun.
Let's get Andy, final thoughts from you, and then we'll get out. Andy's going to be joining me Tuesday morning. We were going to do a post game tomorrow when the game's done so late. I'm flying to Mexico for vacation on Monday. So hopefully Tuesday morning there, beachside, Andy and I will be recapping XFL week 1. And then John Vogel will be joining me. I think we're going to do a live show Friday as opposed to the normal. It'll be around the normal time. I think we'll just do a live show because I can't edit and upload from Mexico. But really appreciate, Mike and Evan, Greg and John, Andy, the whole time, everyone else that came on. We got back heavy at the end, but I think that's okay. Hopefully you guys all give me the patience for working through all this today. But Andy, final thoughts from you. And it just means a lot, everyone taking the time to hop on today.
Yeah, listen, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for putting in all of the work that you have these last few years. When the lights were off for this league, the lights were still on for all of us. And I think that is a huge understatement, honestly, because the work that's been done by all of you guys, the media, the scouts, and anybody who is involved and really passionate about this as much as I am. And believe me, I'm sort of newer to the game compared to a lot of you. I'm still getting my feet wet in this field. And to see it just kind of culminate to this point and kind of keep it going after all of the ups and downs, the roller coasters that we've been through in the last few years, especially through all of that. I just have to tip my cap to all of you guys. You've been doing such great work for individual teams, for different leagues, the alt football spectrum in general. This is fantastic. And I really don't believe we're here without a lot of your work. I truly believe that. And that goes for everybody. Reed, you've done a tremendous job of bringing all of us here together. It's just kind of, we're the Brady Bunch right now in this little 6-panel collection here, but you've brought in so many other people into this spectrum, have introduced me to so many different elements of this as well. So thank you for putting this on and for all the work. And that all being said, I can't wait for today and for this weekend and for the rest of the season. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
It's good here. Max says, thanks for dealing, listener Max, everyone knows. Thanks for dealing with my chirping, y'all. I know I can be pushy, but I love getting the public hard to find information out to everyone. I hope it's send you all well. Yes. And Elusive Poet says, thinking of Josh Davis. Got a little think that's a good, I think that's a really good way to, kind of hit me there. I think that's a really good way to end this. Make sure you guys subscribe. We're going to be giving away 2 tickets to either the XFL Championship game or the USFL Championship game. Hopefully we hit the 3,500 mark by the end of the XFL season here so we can start planning for that. I really appreciate you guys all today. I'm going to play I updated the outro music, so we'll play that. And thank you guys all so much. And I know you didn't all get to talk as much as the knowledge you all have. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reed.
Thank you, Reed.
We'll see you this week.